Alright, we finally made it. We're looking at the SysAdmin job interview questions that are considered advanced now. If you didn't watch the previous videos, I had an easy or low level part and then a medium, 2 parts for the medium, so look for part 2 and part 2.5. But let's see what opensource.com has to say about some advanced SysAdmin questions. Question number 1, how does traceroute work and what protocol does it use? Oh my gosh, this does not feel like very high level at all. They say that the command traceroute or traceroute depends on the operating system, basically allows you to see exactly what routers you touch as you move through the chain of connections to your final destination, whatever destination that is. If you end up with a problem where you can't connect to or ping your final destination, this traceroute can help in that you can tell exactly where the chain of connections stop. So it's good to help you for troubleshooting. With this information, you can contact the correct people, whether it be your own firewall, your ISP, your destination's ISP, or somewhere in the middle. The traceroute command, like ping, uses the ICMP protocol, but also can use the first step of the TCP three-way handshake to send SYN requests for a response. But the use of ping inside that is what really makes sense to me. So how about I ask this, what are you basically doing when you use traceroute? And my answer would be, essentially you ping every router you touch on the way to a certain place. So it's like dropping off little ping packets at each hop. Okay, next question is, what is the main advantage of using chroot or change route? And when and why do we use it? What is the purpose of the mount dev, mount proc, and mount sys commands in a chroot environment? An advantage of having a chroot environment is that the file system is isolated from the physical host, since chroot has a separate file system inside your file system. The difference is that chroot uses a newly created root / as its root directory. Alright, so it's like running as a virtual root, I guess. Maybe a better way to say it would be like, they call it a jail though. So a chroot jail lets you isolate a process and its child from the rest of the system. It should only be used for processes that don't run as root users can break out of the jail easily. So I think that's a good question. When shouldn't you use chroot? Don't use it when you're root. Now the idea is that you create a directory tree where you copy or link in all of the system files needed for the process to run. Then you use the chroot system to tell it the root directory now exists at the base of this new tree, and then start the process running that chroot's environment. Since the command then can't reference paths outside the modified root directory, it can't perform operations like read or write maliciously on those locations. So we're talking a big cybersecurity thing with chroot. Speaking of which, how do you protect your system from getting hacked? Well, by following the principle of least privilege and these practices. You should encrypt with public keys, which provide excellent security. You should enforce password complexity as a sysadmin. Enforce it, even though the workers might grumble. You should understand why you're making exceptions to the rules above if you do have to. You should review those exceptions regularly and hold someone to account for failure. Alright, next up is the LVM, and what are the advantages of using LVM? Well, a logical volume management uses a storage device management technology that gives users the power to pull and abstract the physical layout of component storage devices for easier and flexible administration. Using the Device Mapper Linux kernel framework, the current iteration, LVM2, can be used to gather existing storage devices into groups and allocate logical units from the combined space as needed. So how about I rate that? What assists you in managing storage? And your answer is the logical volume management. Should you say tool, program, or they say technology? So LVM is a management technology that uses the power to basically manage the storage. Ooh, the next one looks fun. What are sticky ports? Sticky ports are one of the network administrator's best friends and worst headaches. They allow you to set up your network so that each port on a switch only permits one, or whatever number you decide, computer to connect to that port by locking it to a particular MAC address. So I'm just going to say what is a sticky port, and that's where you take a switch and one of the ports on that switch, so we're talking about a physical port, not the port that's involved in a socket, but you connect that particular port to a particular computer using the MAC address. And it seems simple enough, so I hope the worst headaches thing is more of a rarity than the idea that it's a best friend. Alright, next up is explain port forwarding. So when trying to communicate with systems on the inside of a secured network, it can be very difficult to do so from the outside. So the use of a port forwarding table within the router itself, or other connection management device, can allow specific traffic to automatically forward to a particular destination. So for example, if you had a web server running on your network and you wanted to grant access to it from the outside, you would set up a port forwarding to port 80 on the server in question, and this would mean that anyone entering your IP address in a web browser would connect to the server's website immediately. Now they note right here that it is usually not recommended to allow access to a server from the outside directly into your network. So for that reason, I'm going to ask you, why should you just forget about port forwarding? I guess we could go and do some research like port forwarding fails? After Googling that, just have fun. I'm going to focus on the article though for this video. But leave any interesting findings you have in the comments below. So 22 says, what is a false positive and a false negative in the case of intrusion detection systems? Alright, that's just too easy to answer. Why is it in the advanced section? Now this, though, does look kind of advanced. So explain that and how to stop this code if you are already logged into a system. So I'm writing right here, what does a fork bomb look like? Because that's what it looks like. And here's how we could break it down. This first part, the eyeballs and the open mouth, it defines the function with a colon as the function name, and the empty parentheses shows that it will not accept any arguments. So there's nothing inside there, but this is the name of the fork bomb, the two eyes. Now curly braces shows the beginning and end of the function definition, so that is pretty straightforward right there. This next part, which almost looks like a Chinese symbol, loads a copy of the function, there's its name again, into memory, and then it pipes its output to another copy of that function, which also has to be loaded into memory. Now the ampersand is where it gets interesting. Like before, this makes the previous item a background process that the child processes will not get killed even though the parent gets auto-killed. In the very first video of this small series on SysAdmin questions, we went over this ampersand. Now to finish off the last colon right there, why are they skipping the semicolon? Oh, because maybe that's just saying that's the end. Okay, so just the colon at the end executes the function again, and hence the chain reaction begins. Now the best way to protect a multi-user system is to use privileged access management to limit the number of processes a user can use. So my question, how can you limit the number of processes a user can use? You would be using a process access management. No, wrong P. You'd be using a privileged access management system to do that. Now the biggest problem with a fork bomb is the fact that it takes up so many processes, so we have two ways of attempting to fix this. If you are already logged into the system, one option is to execute a sigstop command to stop the process. It could look like this: kill all, stop, tac u for user 1. If you can't use the command line due to all processes being used, you will have to use exec to force it to run. So just put it at the beginning and you're good. With fork bombs, your best option is preventing them from becoming too big of an issue in the first place. So my question is just like, why is it called a fork bomb? What an interesting name. Alright, so for our very last one, what is OOM Killer and how does it decide which process to kill first? So if memory is exhaustively used up by processes to the extent that possibly threatens the system stability, then the out-of-memory OOM Killer comes into the picture. Sounds like an assassin. OOM Killer, or OOM Killer, first has to select the best processes to kill. How do you choose? Best here refers to the process which will free up the maximum memory being upon being killed, and is also the least important to the system. The primary goal is to kill the least number of processes to minimize the damage done and at the same time maximize the amount of memory freed. To facilitate this goal, the kernel maintains an OOM_score for each of the processes, and you can use the OOM score of each of the processes in the proc file system under the PID directory. So if you type in cat and that and the process identification followed by OOM score, you can see, like they're saying, each of the processes. And then like an assassin, go kill them. The higher the value of the score for any process, the higher its likelihood is of being killed by the OOM killer in an out-of-memory situation. Alright, so I would need to research that more. Here's the conclusion if you want to pause and read it, but that's it for this video. My final question would just be like, what more can you tell me about the OOM killer?